Welcome back to GAA Fan TV. My name is Aaron. I'm delighted to be joined here by Johnny Keogh for a preview of this weekend's National Hurling League final between Limerick and Kilkenny. It's a repeat of the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship final from last year, with Limerick going up against Kilkenny once again in a hugely important game, as it always is when these two play each other. I suppose, Johnny, how's things with yourself, first of all? I mean, it's maybe it's a bit unusual seeing Limerick in a National Hurling League final. I suppose the last few years you've kind of, I suppose, been giving everyone else a chance before the championship. But this time around, in fairness, even with players rested and everything else, you're still gunning, and here you are out on another big national final occasion.
Yeah, it's great, Aaron. Yeah, I think things are really starting to come together, maybe in the league as well. It's just been a continuation of last year, really, for Limerick. Just unearthing more players. Of so many of the 20s team that reached the All-Ireland final, losing to Kilkenny last year, have stepped up 4 or 5 to the panel. And obviously, we'll talk about that as we go on. But yeah, the last one in 2020, and that was COVID interrupted with, that Munster quarter final against Clare doubling up as the league final. But I gave everyone a chance in 21 and 22. So maybe now, no, joking aside, look, it's just Limerick seem to be, and even talking to John Kiley today, as I'll talk about later as well, at the Munster Championships launch, they're in a better position this time than they were this time last year. Certainly from a physical standpoint, he feels they started early. They got a bit of work done in December before they went off on a team holiday, and it looks to have really, really helped them along. And obviously, as you said, finding themselves in a league final.
Absolutely, yeah. And do you think the approach has been different this year going into the start of the league, or do you think it's been a case, as you said, like obviously plenty of under-20 success in the last couple of years? I think you're an under-20 All-Ireland final, was it last year as well? So like plenty of, that's by the point, yeah. So plenty of players obviously coming through. So I suppose it's been a good time to rotate with those players coming through.
Yeah, it's been like it's been an interesting one off season. Players came back at different times. Different players were given extended leave and things like that. The 20s has been a part of it. An influx of new blood into a panel is always a good thing. But it's just the biggest difference from what I can see is they got to start that bit earlier. Training wise, it got that few weeks bit of work done in December. So that bit of physical work done in that time, has put them in good stead for the whole league probably, and championship beyond. So I think that is probably the biggest difference. They did look a bit leggy in last year's league as a prime example. Limerick go out to win every match, Aaron. Like that, they're unashamed about that. Whether both teams wanted to be in a league final is a different story 2 weeks out from championship. But as like Mike Casey said today, John Kiley said it after the Tipperary game, you'd be looking for challenge games if you weren't in this league final this close out from championship. So I think this misnomer of teams not wanting to be in a league final, look, it's silverware at stake at the end of the day, and it's not a run-of-the-mill pre-season competition. It's a national title. And speaking to a couple of ex-Limerick players this week that don't have them, they would love to have them. And hearing Limerick players talk, they certainly want to have them in their back pocket by the time their career finishes.
Yeah, because I suppose, like, even when you say it there as well, like with the fact that it is a piece of silverware, like I think probably the general hurling fans or general GA fans, and I'm sure even Limerick fans as well, probably even forget that it was only 5 or 6 years ago that Limerick were, outside of, you might have picked up the odd trophy here and there, but generally speaking, like there was a huge drought of All Irelands. There was a big drought of a Munster title as well, I think between 2013 and obviously then in I think 2019, I think it was. So there's definitely a bit of a gap there. So like generally speaking, silverware hasn't come all the time for Limerick. So you can't take these days for granted, because although they've been brilliant the last couple of years, you just never know when they might go away.
No, that's exactly it, Aaron. Like you go from 1973 to 2018, 45 years in between All Irelands. And there was a fair gap from the 40s to 73 before that. So we do know about starvation in Limerick when it comes to titles. You look at Munster title, it was 1996 to 2013, and then 2013 to 19. And you have to go back as far as 97, I think, from a league up to 2019 as well. So the Munster Championship, in 2013 maybe got things started a little bit. But yeah, that a plethora of titles in recent years. 2 league titles, as I said, in 19 and 20. But Limerick fans have been starved of success for a very, very long time at this stage. And like you win while you can. I think every team has to have their window, or when their window appears, I should say, they have to milk it for all it's worth. And I think that's exactly what Limerick are doing right now, and that's what they'll want to continue to do. There's no guarantee of that. So when you're in a final, it's there to be won, no matter what that final is, whether it's a league final or, of course, an All-Ireland final. And Limerick's record in recent years has just been astonishing, obviously. But you go back to pre-2018, and you've won Munster title in a long, long time and nothing else. And that kind of came out of nowhere under John Allen in 2013. No one was fancying Limerick before that. And they'd had a bit of success at 21 level, winning a Munster 21 in 2011, I think it was, that helped, like Declan Hannon and Shane Dowling on that 21 team as youngsters. Like, so you don't get to be in these finals that often. So when they're there to be won, you got to try and win them as best you can. I think that's the way both Kilkenny and Limerick will be framing it this weekend.
Yeah, just a comment here from Mead Man, who says missing the United game to be here, loyal fan of the channel. Well, I suppose appreciate the support. I hope you don't miss much anyway. Just saying, but hopefully anyway you're not missing too much, in fairness. But just looking at Limerick's route, obviously to the final, as you were saying, like obviously beating on the opening day against Cork, and since then have come back with 4 wins against Galway, Clare, Wexford and Westmeath. So I suppose when you were looking at Limerick on the opening day of the league against Cork, I remember in the first half it looked, as good as anything we've seen from Limerick in the last couple of years. And then in the second half, obviously Cork came roaring back and won the game. So when you were thinking of it then, were you thinking maybe it was kind of, a lot of work to be done? And did you expect from that point for Limerick to crack on and maybe reach a league final, or what was your thought process after that game?
Yeah, it's so early in the season, you don't know what's coming, Aaron. There was enough in that first half from Limerick's point of view. I think some of the hurling they played, not all of it came off, don't get me wrong, but some of the hurling they played was outstanding. You're thinking, wow, this is really, really impressive stuff. Second half, I think there was that serious injury to Robbie O'Flynn. Cork had got the goals. There were soft enough goals. I think Limerick would have been disappointed. They don't usually concede those kind of goals that they did concede against Cork and Páirc Uí Chaoimh on that Saturday night. Then, as you said, you move into the Clare game the week later, and it wasn't. Everyone I think that was in the two Gaelic grounds that evening was very surprised by what Clare produced. Limerick could only go out and beat what was in front of them, and they did so fairly handsomely outside of 2 Clare goals again. And then you move up to Galway, and something similar, and that just seems to be a lot of players kind of being thrown in by Henry Shefflin to give them a chance, put them up against opposition. But was that a dummy team getting ready for championship? Only time will tell. And then fairly routine victories over Westmeath and Wexford, and then obviously leading into the league semi-final. But no, at the start of the year, you have your thoughts and think, yeah, Limerick will be the same as they were in the last 2 years. Treat the league for what it was, as starting late in the in their preparation for the season ahead. But no, they've managed to navigate their way through to a semi-final initially, and obviously the final now. And as you said, give so many players their head as well at different times. I think there's been 6 changes in the last 3 games, different changes each time. And it wouldn't surprise me again if there was another 6 more for Sunday's final. I think John Kiley probably and Paul Kinner know their best team. It'd be fairly hard to differentiate from, I'd say, 13 of last year, starting 15 the All-Ireland. And you had Cian Lynch and Peter Casey, who seem to be back in full form. Lynch especially since recovering from injuries. Certainly the injury that kept him out of the All-Ireland final last year. Of course, Peter Casey had a cruciate year before the All-Ireland final and missed the majority of last season, but he's come back flying as well. So yeah, the argument at the moment is there that Limerick are even stronger this year with what they've brought into the panel and what has happened in the league. But they won't be treating it that way. It's been a very competitive panel anyway. But you introduce 4 or 5 fresh young faces coming out of the likes of an under-20 team, champing at the bit. You even saw them in the pre-season Cope Superstores Munster League, where a lot of them made their Limerick debuts at senior level. And, these competitions are hit and miss and whatever else, but these guys were treating it like All-Ireland finals. This was their chance to impress. And suitably, some of them have impressed enough to play most of the league. And it just makes John Kiley's life harder, starting 15, whatever else. But that battle, and it's so often said of quality squads, where that battle to get on to 1 to 11, depending on the sport, or 1 to 15 in GA, is tricky. But to get onto the subs bench is even harder at times. And Limerick are in a very, very strong position when it comes to things like that right now. And that, and I think that's been the biggest thing. Win or lose on Sunday, that's the biggest thing Limerick will take from it, is that they have, I wouldn't say unearthed a few players. I mean, like Cathal O'Neill has been around the last year or two. He was injured at the start of the league campaign due to an injury he picked up in the Fitzgibbon Cup with UL. He's come back flying since the Wexford game, really, the Westmeath game as well, where he came back. So guys like him have been thereabouts anyway. But you look at the likes of Donegal, Gaelic. Micheál Houlihan was on the panel last year. Now, Micheál isn't from the 20s, but 24, 25 years of age, has made his way back onto the Limerick set up from being there at under 21 level. And it just shows as well that Limerick are watching players at every grade and at every team. And you will, if you consistently perform and you get your chance, you do have a route into the Limerick senior panel. And it's great to see some injection of new blood. But like in that Tipperary League semi-final, you had the likes of Garrod Hegarty, Kyle Hayes, Dan Morrissey on the bench, and you still come out with a second half performance that Limerick did, even with those on the bench. Seamus Flanagan as well, of course. That's 5 All-Stars in recent years coming off the bench. And, I think it was Flanagan came on, Hegarty came on towards the end as well. Just a plethora of goods at the moment for Limerick.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and even some of those players you mentioned, like the likes of Donegal Darling, who scored 110 so far, Micheál Houlihan, he's got 17 points so far, and even Adam English as well has been a great addition to the side. Like, I suppose that shows just how strong things are going hurling wise in Limerick at the minute. Like, I think it would be very easy for a manager like John Coyley to have seen Limerick obviously win 3 All-Irelands in the last 3 years, look at things this year and rotate a little bit here or there, but stick to the strongest starting 15. But in fairness, he's rotated quite a lot. He's tried different things out, and he's given a lot of players opportunity, and you have to give him credit for that, because as you were saying there, like, I think for teams who are winning and dominating, it'd be very easy just to stick to the same core group of players and maybe even shrug off the league and just focus on the championship. But in fairness, he's given these lads game time, and that could be crucial as well, come championship time, especially if you do have injuries or anything like that comes up further down the line.
Yeah, exactly, Aaron. It's very much the nature of the championships now, the Leinster and Munster round robins. It's fast, it's intense, and you will need your squad at different times in it. There's no point saying otherwise. We saw it last year with Limerick when Cian Lynch went down. After 8 or 9 minutes against Waterford, Cathal O'Neill was the man trusted, a young player trusted by the Limerick senior management to go in and play centre forward in that Limerick team. They messed around with it, of course, bringing Kyle Hayes back to centre forward as the season went on, but that showed the trust in players. And even in the All-Ireland final, when you look back, Conor Boylan came in off the bench, Cathal O'Neill came in off the bench. They scored when they did come on. So making massive contributions. We saw with David Reedy, not always the starter with Limerick last year, but came on certainly against Galway, the All-Ireland semi-final last year. Huge impact, made an impact in the final as well. And you mentioned Adam English. Adam English has been a bit of a prodigy in Limerick for a couple of years. He was very unfortunate last year, just hampered by injuries consistently. But Adam used that time. I think it was a knee injury he was out with for so long. Used that time to bulk up. And you look at him now and where he was a year ago. It's scary to see the difference in him. He's still under 20s. Shane O'Brien, who I didn't mention a few minutes ago, from another player that's really impressed in the league. He's only out of school. A year ago, he was winning a Croke Cup with Ardscoil Reach and having lost the Harty Cup final as well. So there's some of these guys are still 20s. There's some from just out of 20s. And then you go look around, Limerick had a strong panel anyway, So as I said already, the league has just been such a fruitful thing for Limerick in 2023. And not just for this year, I think as well. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't have picked Donegal Dálaigh out as a player to come through that 20s so quickly. You would have picked out Shane O'Brien and Adam English over the last couple of years, along with Cathal O'Neill and maybe Fergal O'Connor, who's made a few appearances at corner back as well. But when it comes to Donegal Dálaigh, I mean, with his club Monaghan won an All-Ireland Intermediate club championship in Croke Park in January. Donegal had a quiet enough game first half, scored 5 points from playing the second half, and he's kind of just kept going from there. It just seems like no barriers to to stop him in what he wants to do. So yeah, the guys like that, and it's just then of course it has the knock-on effect of putting pressure on guys that are already on the panel. I mean, Paul
Yeah.
Kinnerk and John Kiley must be turning up the train. Who will we put under pressure tonight? Like, and it seems to be the case, talking to some of the players after games and talking to management, that it is as competitive as you'd imagine within Limerick setup at every single training session. It's very difficult to tell who's the A and who's the B side. And that's not being disrespectful to any other county or anyone else in that, but it's just so highly competitive within that panel that players can slip in at a moment's notice. Colin Coughlin is a player I haven't mentioned who slipped in just as easy against Tipperary out wing back. And Limerick have this huge advantage of anytime they play a game, the wing back like Kyle Hayes, if he's there, can score. Declan Hannon can score. Dermot Burns is a phenomenal scorer, as we all know, the hurler of the year last year, and has come back seamlessly into the squad. And when you have half backs that can come up, there's a bit of slagging going on in the Limerick team as well at the moment, that Sean Finn is the only player without a score playing for Limerick seniors now, after Mike Casey and Richie English scored against Wexford in the league. And and there's a bit of slagging about that, but there's an element of truth to it. Barry Nash, as we've all seen in the last couple of years, since he's been reinvented into an attacking cornerback, is the only way you could call it, has reinvented maybe that position, or seen other teams trying to copy it now as well. So there's just so many options available for Limerick. Again, I'll go not only for this season, but for the future as well.
Yeah, like and even looking at William O'Donoghue's suspension for this week as well, like as he said, like that just presents another opportunity for another player to slot in and make the case, and again, it's another great opportunity for someone to go in there, even with that suspension. Like obviously, you don't want those suspensions to happen. You don't want to see players getting red cards or injuries or anything like that. But Limerick have the options there to replace these kind of players if these scenarios do develop, which can only be a positive, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've seen Barry Murphy, player who's been in and around the panel since 18-19. He actually started the championship in 18. I think it was against Tipperary first up. So Barry had won a Fitzgibbon Cup at UL as a corner forward alongside Tipperary duo Jason Ford and John McGrath. And arguably Barry at the time was performing better than those two. So that shows you the kind of pedigree he has, but hasn't been really getting a look in recent years. Like just he'd been in and around the 26, but they've tried something with Barry and putting him in midfield, and it's worked a treat. He was outstanding against Tipperary the last time. So you'd imagine he'd be the leading candidate to partner Darragh O'Donovan if Darragh O'Donovan has recovered from an ankle knock, kept him out of Tipperary, which we're told is more than likely the case. You've Adam English, to everyone's surprise, was slotted in there when he came on against Clare early on. In that game, he's played there for the 20s as well in the last couple of weeks. So there's another option there. They've Jimmy Quilty, who's out injured, who was captain of that 20 side last year. They just seem to have not only one player for each position now, on the bench. They seem maybe to have two, which is a really, really, great thing to have options wise. But if injuries do come, and injuries will come for Limerick, I mean, you were like, who would have said Limerick last year? You saw a lot of talk about Limerick teams catching up with them and different things like that, which of course there's an element of that. Limerick came through some very hard battles last year. You only have to look back to the Waterford game at the two Gaelic ground, second game up. They had to really pull out all the stops. Waterford came with goals late on, and if the game went on any further, could have been caught. Clare in Ennis was a tough game that ended in a draw. Obviously, the Munster final was a real humdinger of a game that went to extra time. The All-Ireland semi-final against Galway, and of course the final against Kilkenny. Really tough, intense games. But Limerick won them games without Cian Lynch and Peter Casey. And you take Cian Lynch out of any team, that they're going to be, you're going to feel that loss. But Limerick just got on with it, and that's, I think, the real characteristic of this team at times. If a negative thing happens or someone goes down injured, it is very much a case of next man up, and it'll be the same with William O'Donoghue's suspension on Sunday. Someone will step up. We're not sure. Judging by recent games, it could be Barry Murphy, but they could spring a surprise there with someone like Dan Morrissey, who's covered full back, wing back, has played midfield for Limerick before as well. And it just, when you have those options and players go down for whatever reason, it must give the rest of the panel huge confidence, the management team huge confidence, and Limerick supporters huge confidence as well. When you see a guy coming in off the bench or coming in from the start, goes, geez, he's just going to fill another role, and that's what Limerick have consistently been able to do.
Yeah, and how do you think John Coyley will approach this game then? Because as you said, like plenty of young players have made appearances, but he has obviously thrown in the likes of Cole Hayes, the odd time. Keane Lynch has made the odd appearance, Gerard Hegarty as well, Tom Morrissey the same. So how do you think he'll approach the league final? Obviously with the Munster Championship on the horizon, like will he go strong? Will he mix it, or how do you see him approaching this game?
It's hard to tell, Aaron. It's always difficult to know what Limerick are thinking. You know, a couple of years ago they moved Kyle Hayes from centre forward to wing back in something that shocked everyone. Kyle had played wing back and centre back at underage level with Limerick up to 21s as a centre back as well, but no one was expecting it given how prolific he was as centre forward. So Limerick are always capable of throwing something, a rabbit into that, then threw him back into the forwards last year with moving Dan Morrissey to wing back with Kyle eventually setting at centre forward when Keane got injured. To answer your question, the reality is no one knows. They've made 6 changes, as I said, in a good few of the games each time, and it was a surprise to see 6 changes again for the Tipperary semi-final. But it could be 6 changes again. You just don't know. I mean, you look across the full back line. You've the likes of Mike Casey, Sean Finn, Dan Morrissey, and Richie English looking for 3 positions maybe. Given that Kyle's back at wing back, Dan can cover there. So you go Colin Coughlin, Kyle Hayes, Dan Morrissey for left wing back. You know, you have similar options at centre back. Declan Hannon is so key, but Dan Morrissey has filled in there in the league as well. So Dan is that kind of utility player. You can put him anywhere and you'll get a high performance out of him. You know, you look into the forwards, as I've already mentioned, you're probably looking at Garrod, Tom Morrissey, and Keane Lynch as your starters, but you've Cathal O'Neill, you've Micheál Houlihan, you've Adam English can play there as well. I've already mentioned the midfield options, and then you went to the full forward line with, as we've already said, Donegal Dálig, Peter Casey, Seamus Flanagan, and plenty more on top of that coming off the bench. Shane O'Brien, and Adam English can go in corner forward as well. So all those kind of options, and if you're watching that from the outside, you're thinking, well, any of them can do a job for you inside. So will Limerick go full strength? I don't think so. No, at full strength as we'd perceive it anyway, as close to the All Ireland final team as possible. I don't think so. No. But I think 2 weeks out from championship, I think John Coyley knows exactly who is starting that Waterford game, bar any little hiccups in the meantime. So who starts on Sunday? It's very difficult to know. I think you'll see largely the starting team, maybe 9 or 10 of the team that starts against Waterford in a couple of weeks' time. But that 5 or 6 interchangeable players could happen again.
Yeah, Keane says here it promises to be a cracker of a final. Kilkenny seem to be the closest challengers to Limerick at the moment. Kilkenny would love to get the post-Cody era off to a winning start. And I suppose, like focusing on Kilkenny, I suppose they've, been maybe a little bit similar to Limerick in some ways, where they've also tried out a lot of their under 20 players from last year. I mean, you have the likes of Billy Drennan, for example, who's been sensational so far for Kilkenny. Scored 265 across the league so far. So, I mean, from a Kilkenny perspective, obviously with Derek Lyng coming in, it's a huge game for them as well. Like if they can, pick up a piece of silverware in his first season, then I wouldn't say the monkey's off the back a little bit with Cody obviously not being there, but it certainly does relieve the pressure a little bit anyways going into the championship. And, picking up the first piece of silverware at the first crack, that cannot be a bad thing, especially for Kilkenny, who we know love to win big finals, and this would be another one.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it may be, and this isn't being disingenuous, it may be just that little bit more important for Derek Lyng and Kilkenny, given that Limerick's success in recent years, and Kilkenny, just having a little bit of a little barren spell. Derek Lyng, from his point of view, will get a bit of a monkey off his back very quickly. He'll give him a bit of breathing space. But yeah, you've said it. Like they've had a very similar league campaign to Limerick, with losing one game and winning the rest. It was that performance that I saw most of the game in that game against Tipperary at Nolan Park, and they really looked at that stage that that things weren't going maybe according to plan, or maybe that too much experimentation was going on, but they really knuckled down. That win over Waterford as well. That was huge, the 2-point victory, and I think that gave them confidence going into the Cork game. Obviously, in last week's league semi-final. They've experimented too. One of the more fascinating ones for me is Paddy Deegan in the half-forward line. That whether it's a long-term thing. You see Pádraig Walsh back at cornerback, a bit like in the Barry National, linking the defence and having the ability to link defence to attack with good delivery into the forwards. But you know what you're going to get from every Kilkenny side. They're gonna go hard at you physically, fairly, and more often than not. And Limerick are going to give exactly the same. But from Kilkenny's point of view, it's been an interesting league for Derek Lyng. He has a very unenviable task in taking over from Brian Cody. He won an All-Ireland 20s last year, as you mentioned. There's several of that side being introduced already in the league. The obvious one being Billy Drennan. He's just been a breath of fresh air in that Kilkenny side. You know, took over the freeze seamlessly when asked to do so. As you scored 265, which is no mean feat in any league. You know, that's nearly 12 points a game. Really impressive stuff from him. But they still have the likes of Martin Keown inside and full forwards, dangerous. Mossy Keown. But like what a lot of people aren't really focusing on so far, they still have Owen Cody, TJ Reid and Adrian Mullen to come back in from the Ballyhale lads. Dara Corcoran has been back, is back introduced with Kilkenny, another younger player who again started in that UL Fitzgibbon Cup winning side as well. Kilkenny are going to bring everything to try and win this, and they of course have the extra week before the Leinster Championship gets underway from their point of view as well. So I just think it has all the makings, as Cian texted in there, of a cracking final on Sunday. But as you say, Kilkenny, you know, they still have the likes of Walter Walsh. They still have the likes, you know, of Richie Hogan. Richie making his first start in something like 3-4 years in that Cork game as well, you know. And if you can bring on the likes, and they showed in the All-Ireland final last year, plenty left in the tank of Walter Walsh. There's plenty left in Richie's tank, despite all his injury woes over the last few years. And you have we all know how well TJ Reid keeps himself. It's almost a profession for him in his work life as well. It is his profession to fitness and strength and conditioning, you know. So TJ, despite whatever age he is at this stage, 34, 35, he's going to come back fit as a fiddle, you know that. And you bring in the likes of Adrian Mullen, the couple of under 20 players, the likes of Owen Cody, who was a revelation for Kilkenny last year. And you're looking at a Kilkenny outfit that, of course, can win on Sunday, but they'll be giving the All-Ireland the senior rattle, or the senior All-Ireland the fair rattle as well.
Yeah, would you concur with that comment there as well, that maybe they're the closest challengers? Like, I think if you were to look at it, I think almost most fans anyway, I think the majority of fans would certainly have Limerick probably a good bit ahead of the rest. And I suppose below that, there's a lot of teams probably, you know, chipping at being the closest challengers. But when you look at Kilkenny, obviously All-Ireland finalists last year, now they're in the league final again. As you said, they're missing the likes of TJ Reid, Owen Cody, but they're introducing younger players, bit of underage success last year as well. So, like, the Kilkenny sort of production line is certainly not slowing down anyway. Like, they're going to continuously keep bringing through players over the next couple of years. So, definitely going into this year's All-Ireland with a big show.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a hard one to judge. You've so many counties have first year managers this year, so there has to be a bit of a bedding in period there. Outside of, I think it is Limerick and Galway, everyone else changed. Shefflin in the second year in Galway. Obviously, you've Micheál Donoghue in Dublin. You've Davy in Waterford, Wexford, Darry Egan as well, of course, in his second year. You go to Cork with Pat Ryan, and you go all the way around. You go to Liam Cahill. Now, maybe Tipperary may have something to say about that. Brian Lohan is in his third year with Clare as well. Tipperary under Liam Cahill, there was enough in Tipperary's performance against Limerick, I think, certainly in the first half, to say they're going to be there in with a shout. It's hard to know where Cork are. It really is after that performance against Kilkenny. It seems like they were just a bit confused about what they were doing, whether they were still looking at the way Kieran Kingston wanted them to play and trying to merge with Pat Ryan's trying to do. And it just seemed at times, I think there was an incident towards the end of the game where Kieran Joyce was in his own half back line, no one near him. All the Kilkenny players had withdrew back inside their own half. He didn't know what to do with the ball and just got pulled up for overcarrying. You know, so Cork, maybe it's not going to be their year as well, but probably Kilkenny, judging on last year. You know, last year it was all talk of Waterford, you know, that had a great league campaign, and then they came in and against Limerick, put in a very good showing in the two Gaelic grounds, and then it all fell to pieces from there, having beaten Tipperary in the first game. So it's just so hard to judge. It's just so competitive in those round-robin games. I would like to see a bit like Micheál Donoghue definitely experimented in the league with Dublin. I think there's so much more in Dublin that is yet to be unearthed. Dalo, I think, was the last one to really get something concrete out of that Dublin Dublin's set up, and I know there's incoming and outgoings within that Dublin panel, probably too many, over the last couple of years. You look at Wexford, have had a very, very tough league. Waterford, full well that Davy's going to have something ready for Limerick first day out in Semple Stadium in Thurles. But are Waterford, good enough to make a tilt at the All-Ireland? We'll find out soon enough. But I think, Kilkenny probably second best place to Limerick at the moment. And then I think Tipperary are probably the best of the rest right now. But you do have Clare as well. If Tony Kelly catches fire, Clare are a big danger for everyone as well. But the question is, if you stop Tony Kelly like Kilkenny did in last year's All-Ireland semi-final, where is Clare's firepower coming from? And I think that's their biggest thing. But yeah, Kilkenny look serious operators at this stage.
Yeah, and like, what kind of plan do you think Limerick will have for Billy Drennan? I mean, it would be obviously the first time the senior team are going up against them. Obviously, a few of the under-20s probably very familiar with him over the last couple of years. So I'm sure there is a lot of familiarity of going up against them. But who do you think would pick him up or man mark him, or how do you think the approach would be? Considering, I suppose, he's been very impressive for Kilkenny this year.
Yeah, I think Limerick's opinion on things like that, and is we'll concentrate on ourselves and we won't move out of our system the way we play for anyone. Prime example of that is Tony Kelly. Tony Kelly plays a free role in pretty much every game he plays for Clare. Mikey Butler followed him all over Croke Park. I think he even followed him into the toilets at halftime. He was that tight, but Limerick don't do that. They, like, Tony Kelly had an amazing Munster final, but effectively, until he got inside the 45, no one was marking him. If he was out midfield, he was on his own, and that's the way Limerick set up. If your guy scores 15 points, well, we'll have a combination of, if you don't score goals, we'll outscore you, and that has been Limerick's modus operandi for 4 or 5 years now. So I don't think they'll have any plan for Billy Drennan. I think that the biggest thing for Limerick of how they will stop Kilkenny in that sense with regard to Billy Drennan on the freeze is just to try not concede as many and just limit that aspect of his game. But again, Kilkenny could spring a surprise as well. By TJ could start from nowhere, Mullen could start it, don't go. You just don't know, and that's the beauty of this time of the year. There is nothing certain, but certainly the one thing that is certain, I should say, is that Limerick won't make any special plan for any player. Let it be Tony Kelly, Billy Drennan, Patrick Horgan in Cork, or whoever else comes against them. Jason Ford against Tipperary a few weeks ago. They won't knock out of their own system for anyone, and will back themselves to outscore every other team.
Yeah, and how do you see the game sort of going then, or panning out? As you said, like, it probably is a game that means more for Kilkenny and Derek Ling to get that piece of silverware, but I'm sure John Coyley and the Limerick lads, and even as you said, some of the fringe players, the younger players, like, this is the perfect opportunity for them to sort of stake a claim going into that Munster round robin, where obviously a lot more of the senior lads will be more fitter and available then. So it is a perfect opportunity for those lads as well. So how do you sort of see the game going?
Yeah, I think it's if everything goes to plan from both sets of teams, and there's no dummy teams and messing around with things like that. I think if they both go arguably close to full strength, you could have a championship like match. And I don't think this isn't going to be a run of the mill league final where a bit of shadow boxing going on. I think both teams will go full tilt. Actually, they'll go full tilt no matter who's on the pitch. I think you'll see plenty of heavy challenges. It's going to be interesting. Pat O'Dwyer, referee from Carlow, likes to let the game go as best he can. Doesn't like blowing his whistle. Likes a fair challenge as well. And he's refereed it more often than not. Tries to keep it going. So it'll be dictated by that as well. But I think you've two physical teams. If we take away the skills of both sets of players for a second. And that's one of the big fascinating things with Limerick and Kilkenny games over the last few years. Certainly, obviously, last year's All-Ireland final physically was, I think it hit new heights from that standpoint alone. Some of the hits at times, fair hits as well, it must be added, it was a very clean game. And even the game back in 19 where Kilkenny beat Limerick, they just met with such enormous ferocity with everything Limerick did to Kilkenny. And I think Sunday will be something similar. And then it'll boil down when things to settle down is who has the best talent on the day. Right now, you have the likes of Cian Lynch, who's just come back so in such amazing form. You've seen some of the clips, I'm sure, all week that are going around on Twitter from the Tipperary game. The little flicks here, there, and everywhere. He really is a wizard in what he's able to do, and it's so effortless as well. It's a funny one. He's so creative and such ability to bring and pick other players out that you forget how good he is in front of goals when he does end up shooting, which from my point of view isn't enough because he's so accurate when he does shoot. He should stop. He should maybe be a bit more selfish, like he did in the 21 All Ireland, where he had 5 or 6 points from play, and it's just a stunning display again. You know, when things opened up for him, rather than set other people up, he went for scores. He did that a bit against Tipperary, 2 outstanding points in the second half. I think he could be key, and I think he could be key for the whole season for Limerick. They can win without him, but he links play together so well for everyone else. And conversely, Kilkenny probably more in this stage, outside of TJ, when TJ isn't player, they're more reliant on 5 or 6 different players needing to score 1-2, 1-3, 1-4 from play, that kind of thing, to beat Limerick. The thing is, Limerick don't, like, Kilkenny got 2 goals against Limerick in last year's All-Ireland final. And when you look back at them goals, like, there was no mistake. It was such beautiful skill that opened up opportunities. Walter Walsh's run, opening up the Limerick defence, but they still had 3 passes to make it into the net. And then the second goal was a thing of beauty as well. So Kilkenny have the ability to open up that Limerick defence. Will Limerick have learned from that last year? Of course they will. But I think Kilkenny will need goals to win this game. And every team that plays Limerick right now needs goals to beat them, to have any chance of beating them. Even then, if you do score 2 goals against them, they still have enough at the other end to score 30-odd points on any given day. So I'm obviously going to continue tipping Limerick. It works out so well for us. For me, anyway, in the last year since I've been chatting to you. But yeah, I think it really could be a tight game. But Limerick, as they showed, like, Tipperary hit Limerick with everything again in the league last time out, and you're thinking maybe Tipperary have something here, but Limerick just upped the tempo so much, and they just look to have that level of gears to keep going up and up, and until someone does beat them in a final or in a big game, they haven't lost in Munster in so long either. I think it was 2020 in a nothing game, or sorry, 2019 in a kind of nothing game against a dead rubber game against Tipperary, when both sides knew they were in the Munster final, and Limerick hammer tip in the Munster final after that. So they're unbeaten in Munster since then. Obviously, Clare kept coming very close last year in both the group stage and the round robin and the Munster final. So Limerick have an ability at the moment, Darren, and it is the sign of very good teams to come out with wins when maybe they shouldn't do at times. I think they did that several times last year. And that is a sign of a good team and a great team, and that's what Limerick are right now. So I just think maybe Kilkenny do need to win more, but I just don't see Limerick, letting up for anyone right now. So if there's silverware available and players are very pointed, Limerick players are very pointed, saying we want that league title. And it must be said as well that both sets of players will want that. And the league, a lot of the conversation around the National Hurling League has been it's been devalued with the 2 divisions. It's this. There's 6-7 teams capable of winning it, and it's dummy teams going out. But look, the championship is number 1 in hurling. You could argue the football league is a very different thing, where teams are playing on their own level. And the likes of Westmeath, the likes of Laois, they have to play these games to improve. They have to play against these teams to get to try and someday get to the pitch. Of the Antrim are in the same boat as well, and Offaly and Kerry further down the list as well. And that's all. So where do you go with the league? At the end of the day, it is still a national title. And that can't be sniffed at. So I think both teams will, as I said earlier, go hell for leather with it. But I think Limerick should just have enough to come out on top.
Yeah, because that's the thing as well. And even you made some great points there. Like, even last year as well, like, every time you did get a significant test, and even the teams like Limerick came up against, like, I feel like every team Limerick played last year played their best against Limerick. Like, even the likes of Waterford and Tipperary, who had poor years in the championship last year, raised their game when they played Limerick. I think Clare definitely gave their best game against Limerick. I remember lots of praises for Galway when you played them in the All-Ireland semi-final. So it does seem like, and it's the makings of a great team, and that's why it's often compared to nearly the Dublin side in Gaelic football when they won the 6 in a row. And not saying that Limerick are going to go on and achieve that or achieve more, or whatever might be the case, but certainly, like, there's so many similarities between the two, and when you look at Limerick, like, every time the going does get tough, they always seem to find an answer, which is why it's very, very hard to back or to go against them really in these big games. And it might be a league final, but as you said before, like, they've, like, things might be going wrong after 15 or 20 minutes, but we know like they have the answer within themselves, and Paul Kinnerk and John Coyley, like they'll figure something out to turn it around, and that always seems to be the case with Limerick in the last year or so, or last couple of
Yeah,
years.
yeah, it does. The prime example is the 2021 Munster final against Tipperary in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, where Tipperary were just awesome in that first half in sweltering heat. It was close to 30 degrees in Cork that day. It was middle of an amazing summer in some aspects, when crowds were just beginning to get back to games as well after COVID, where of course no one was at the All Ireland final in 2020, but there was just, I think there was 8,000 in Páirc Uí Chaoimh for that game. And they didn't panic, they didn't make wholesale changes in that at halftime. There was just an uptake in intensity. Got that early goal, and that it'll be remembered for Kyle Hayes' wonder goal where he soloed in from 80, 90 yards. But Limerick really upped it, and just Tipperary couldn't live with him. That's been the case so often, is when Limerick really pile on the pressure, they start swarming in the tackle, they start winning frees, they start, and then they at times always seem to have an ability to get goals when they really, really need them. They got an early one with Seamus Flanagan in that game against Tip, and they did so as well, of course, against later on in the half with Kyle Hayes as well. Just hit Tip with an absolute blistering, and you hear some people say the best second half of hurling they've ever seen. Or half in general of hurling. It's hard to argue that when you see where Limerick were at half time and then onwards. And I think the confidence that has brought, of no matter what challenge comes at them, they're able to navigate their way through it. And that to me tells you've mentioned the Dublin thing, and there are so many comparisons with that great Dublin team as well. For that same thing, they never seem to be in trouble. That Dublin team always found a route out of trouble, whether it was Stephen Cluxton with that great kick against Mayo to win the final. The right man stood up at the right time. Limerick have that as well, and that is the mark of great teams. And with 4 All-Irelands in 5 years, I think we can now say that this Limerick team will always be remembered as a great team. They've won, 3 in a row. They want more. They want 4 in a row. They want 5 in a row. They want 6 in a row as well. There's no question of that, whether they do or not. But that's imponderable at the moment. But it's just been that ability to get out of trouble when you really, really need to, and come out on the other side. I mentioned it already, and you mentioned it as well, the difficulty in winning the All-Ireland Limerick had last year. And I think John Kiley mentioned it as well, and you mentioned it. Every team pretty much had their best performance against Limerick. They really, really wanted to put it up to the All-Ireland champions. And my God, did every team, outside of maybe Cork in the opening game of the Munster Championship, and Cork scored a goal after 13 seconds. So their intent was to have that performance as well. So, but I do go back and taking away from even what's happened in this league, like Limerick looks stronger again because they've been able to introduce Cian Lynch and Peter Casey back into the starting lineup. And I think those 2 players certainly would get on any team in the country. They'd be, such big influences. And I've spoken about Cian Lynch already, but Peter Casey, all you have to do is remember back to the first 20 minutes of the 21 All-Ireland final, and Peter Casey was having a game for the ages. He scored 5 points from play already before that horrid cruciate injury, and was in line for a Player of the Match award as well that Cian Lynch ended up getting for his outstanding performance, and Hurler of the Year on top of it. So those 2 players are so crucial to Limerick, 2 starters without question for me every single time Limerick go out and play. And you, like I can't reinforce that point more about Cian Lynch being so key to Limerick. They managed to win an All-Ireland last year without him, with every team putting it really, really up to them. And if all goes to plan this year, Limerick on the 23rd of July will be looking to win another, but Cian Lynch will be certainly key to that as well.
Absolutely. So you're back in Limerick by how many points? 2 or 3, or do you think it might be a bit more?
I think 4 or 5. They just seem to be like when they're playing well this year, no matter who it's been against, that 4 or 5, maybe 6 point advantage has been there. I think if Kilkenny are to win, I've mentioned already, they will need goals. I think any team trying to beat Limerick at the moment needs goals, and they need more than 2 by the looks of it as well, because they've been able to navigate through a team scoring 2 goals against them. I mean, Kilkenny scored 226 in All-Ireland final last year. It's going to win the 90% of All-Ireland finals, but Limerick scored 131, so where do you go after that? And that's in saving your best maybe performance of the year for that All-Ireland final. And that's what Limerick like to do as well. They peak as the year goes on. or that's been the trajectory over the last 5 years anyway. So it'll be interesting to see where Limerick go after this league final, win, lose or draw, in the Munster Championship, if they keep improving like they did last year. Because if they do, I don't think any team will be able to come near them, let alone Kilkenny in the league final on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think I'd agree as well. I think Limerick by 4 or 5 points. I think it definitely has the makings of a Limerick victory on Sunday. Well, I suppose we'll wrap things up here, Johnny. Cheers very much for coming on. Very much appreciated. And cheers anyone who tuned in. If you could hit the like button and subscribe, be very much appreciated. And cheers, Johnny, for coming on.
More than welcome.